setting off a 45-minute shootout. The robbers fired more than 1,000 rounds at officers, civilians, TV news choppers too, including Skyfox, before they were killed. Many officers later suffered post-traumatic stress syndrome. 3 committed suicide. Others, depression and substance abuse. Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa and Police Chief William Bratton will speak at today's ceremony.
Remembering 44 minutes of terror 10 years later. Good evening, I'm Christine Devine.
And I'm John Beard. It happened 10 years.
Anyone who saw it will never forget it. The North Hollywood shootout. 2 heavily armed men robbed a bank and then tried to blast their way to freedom. Now, for many of the officers who were there that day in 1997, the shootout defines them. For others, it was just too much to live with.
Well, tonight, for the first time since he cheated death that day, a former LAPD officer is describing the nightmare he played a key role in. Our Serene Branson has his story.
40 speed, question assistant. We have a possible 211 in progress at the Bank of America. Bank of America. Located in north of Kendrick. We have shots fired.
One of the things that got really, really old was those dreams. Every night basically, I'd have dreams about being there and certain parts of it and relive those parts.
15 years after the infamous North Hollywood shootout, the memories are still haunting.
When the rifle went off, it wasn't your typical, rat-a-tat-tat type sound. It sounded like thunder. In a storm, when the storm's right on top of you, it was a huge explosion. I'm John Caparelli. I was an LAPD officer at the 1997 North Hollywood shootout.
Play-by-play into his new book, Uniform Decisions.
I have yet, to this point, come across anybody who's attempted to put in writing what it was like to be there, what it sounded like, what it felt like. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to put a picture out there of what it was like.
The incident changed policing, making rifles accessible to street cops and providing mandatory counseling for officers involved in a shooting, something Caparelli applauds. He had trouble sleeping, coping, and suffered a stress-related stroke 5 years after the shooting, putting him out of work for a year and back on a desk job.
It was a big wake-up call. I changed my attitude. I changed my health routine and so forth. Actually, my job actually changed. I was never able to go back to work the field anymore.
But for some people, the memory hasn't faded. Today, survivors of the North Hollywood bank shootout had a ceremony to commemorate the heroes of that battle.
Christina Gonzalez is live from the scene. Christina.
You know, for those of us who were here 10 years ago, there are things seared in our souls, seared in our souls, seared in our souls.
Absolutely. I've never seen anything like this in all the time that I've been here in the city, and I've seen quite a few bank robberies, and this is just absolutely unbelievable. Normally, they would be holed up inside the bank, but this is just completely brazen when they come out of that bank like that with no regard whatsoever, not only for their own situation, but for anybody else. They're just randomly firing at anything in the area at all, and it looks like they're gotten out just on a side street here in a residential area, and hopefully they don't go anywhere else, but hopefully they can keep them pinned here and not allow them to get into any of the homes in this particular area. But
this incident, which occurred not far from where I live, my brother actually was going to college right down the street from here, was kind of given to me as, why don't you study this event, Mr. Conspiracy Theorist, so to speak. Use your little tools that you've learned, secret trades, numerology, coincidence factors, all these things coming into play, and tell us what you find out of this incident. It's kind of like a final essay, exam, if you want to call it that. And what I found was pretty astounding. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to be giving a biased opinion here, but I'm going to give you some facts that you probably did not know. It's pretty fascinating. The address of the bank was Laurel Canyon 6066.
But this guy is just continuing to walk up. He's firing some more at the officers. And the officers are off to his right, to the right of your picture there, across the street. You can see 2 officers behind those 2 vehicles right there, and they're trying to maintain their cover position so that they can stay away from the suspect's gunfire. But I cannot believe this guy is just continuing to come out here.
The address was Laurel Canyon 6 6606 Laurel Canyon. Now, what's interesting about that is you say, oh, well, 666, that's the number of the beast. Well, if you study ancient numerology and numbers, each number has sort of a code, you know, and they vary a little bit. I mean, there's a million definitions, but they all basically kind of mean the same thing. And basically, even in the biblical term, 666 would represent extreme wealth or a lot of money. 6 is like success or money. So when you hear number of the beast, what it's saying is that the beast will be wealthy, or it'll represent money. It'll be about personal gain and finances, gold, riches. 666 is money. Now, that's just the beginning. I then looked at the other thing, which is, where is the street where they had the final shootout and they got gunned down? Well, the name of the street was Arkwood. And that really, I said, well, now I know why I got this as a final exam. And the final shooting with the guy in front of the car was on Arkwood and on St. Agnes Street. So what did I do? I looked up St. Agnes. Very interesting story there. She's a saint that there's sort of a myth legend about her. And basically in the 1200s, she was a woman who wanted to be just like the Virgin Mary, and so she decided to stay a virgin her whole life. And at the time, the church, this is going to sound typical to some people, did not approve of that. In fact, they actually sent a couple of men to apparently rape her, and they thought it was blasphemy that she would try to not get married and not ever have sexual contact or have children. In other words, they thought she was comparing herself to the Virgin Mary. Well, according to witnesses, when these men came to attack her and assault her, angels of death appeared and struck them down. 2 of them went blind. One of them was killed, and they described them like a lightning bolt from the sky. Like, very strange descriptions of these angels of death, which are very similar to these guys. And these guys die on Arkwood and on St. Agnes Street. There's a lot of other coincidences. I looked at the names. Well, let's do a name breakdown. These are all tools that I use. You have Mata Serrano. Now, if you break down that name, like the Serrano gang, so you have Mata Serrano. Now, he's not Hispanic, but that's interesting. And the word mata means to kill in Spanish. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I looked at Larry Phillips. I thought, well, Larry Phillips, what the hell does that have to do with anything, having to do with guns or battles or war? Well, as I researched it, I looked up what his middle name was. Middle names are important. And his middle name is Warfield. He was born on June 6th, so 6/6 of 1966. 4 6s in his birthday. That's pretty astonishing. Now, these guys were known for basically, being some of the first bank robbers, the high-incident bandits, that used scanners to basically time when they thought the police would show up so that they can get away. That's what they were notorious for, and for being quite brutal. The brutal thing is very interesting to me, because I don't deny that they shot security guards and that they were responsible for these other robberies, where things were supposedly very violent. In this scene, though, I went and looked at the home, what video there is of the security cameras. There's actually a scene where an old man walks in and doesn't even know the robbery is going on, and he walks right into one of the guys with the guns, and the guy gently makes him sit down. And all things considered, when they interview the bank tellers and stuff like that, the violent factor was very minimal, but they went crazy shooting their guns off inside the bank. Now, what's so astonishing is they have these timers to time when the police might show up. Yet when they walk into the bank, and from what you can tell from other security, from the other robberies, this was the first time they ever walked in so heavily armored and in black-clad, body armor. And it wasn't just body armor. Like, they had made it and crafted it so that it was even better than military body armor. Then these bullets, which, they say, well, they were armor-piercing and steel-plated. They came in from Europe or something like that. I mean, I had known AK-47s had existed in Los Angeles for a long time. That's the key component here. This was not simply they had AK-47s. I mean, dude, Eazy-E saying about AK-47s in the hood 15 years before this. And even the police officers say, no, there was something different about these guns. Well, not only that, I mean, we're talking about people that the bullet went through the entire car, not just a door or a window. Went through an entire car and would hit them and penetrate them. Went through brick wall. Like, more people were hurt from the ricochets than from the bullets. No civilians or police officers died in this incident. Now, the two robbers, this is astonishing. The final guy, and this even gets biblical, he was kind of left in the street, and his family sued. In fact, people say that's ridiculous, that the family sued. Well, he was shot 29 times and was not dead, and told the officers to kill me. And he died 70 minutes later after the robbery. And they supposedly took phenobarbital, which one of the guys had because he was he had basically was going into seizures that calmed them down. But then they described that these men are so violent and angry inside the bank. So if they were on downers, if they were on benzos, I don't quite understand that. In fact, the very astonishing fact of this is that I knew there was something going on here that we weren't seeing, even if it was a coincidence or whatever. And the very infamous fact that when the police raided their apartment after this robbery, that they found the scene and the movie Heat in the videotape, which exactly mimicked the real-life incident. That's very spooky. And that there was thousands of dollars in cash spread about the apartment. So they weren't broke. An FBI statistic that's pretty fascinating. Whenever there's a bank robber, the one thing that is always almost guaranteed, it's a very typical statistic, is the lust for money. That bank robbers never leave without the money. Never. In fact, there's been many cases where they could have swam away or they could have gotten away, but they always come back for the money. They never leave the money. In this case, and they describe it as the shooters being angry there wasn't enough money. They go to the vault, they open up the safe, and he opens fire and destroys all the cash. And then the cash that they do have, they immediately abandon it in the parking lot. In fact, in much of the footage, they say, well, here's another bag in the parking lot. We don't know what's in that. It's in the handicap section. They go out of their way to show people that they're abandoning the money. And in interviews, people say that seems to be when the police got very terrified, because they knew that these guys were not here to rob the bank. These guys were here for a shootout. Because you got to keep something in mind. These are the most well-armed bank robbers, supposedly, and I believe that, in the history. I mean, look at all the money that they put in just for the equipment and the time they put in the equipment. And at one point, the police invited them to get the hell out of here, just leave, because they couldn't stand the firepower. They knew they were all going to get killed, but they wouldn't leave. They decided to fight and stay. That this never happened in the history of law enforcement. That you guys, and, okay, well, they're crazy. Well, why do they have what I'm saying, why do they have so much ammunition and body armor? They're doing that to escape. They're doing that to get away, you would think. Why do you invest that much time and effort into equipment to get away from a cop shootout, and yet when the cops tell you you can leave, you decide you don't want to leave? Is bizarre. There's numerous other things, the dates of these things. The fact that many cops killed themselves after this. 400 cops were called. 400 cops were called to this. Many of them are now alcoholics, drug users, have committed suicide, have had strokes, stress-related strokes, thinking about this event years later. And when you interview the civilians, they say, oh, wow, it was crazy. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen. But the police talk about it like they're in another world, like they're in some crazy, World War II D-Day moment. And I don't disbelieve them. I do not disbelieve them. And this would, this was something was going on here. And another thing I noticed with watching the documentaries was many of the officers that killed themselves and such had one eerie coincidence. They made eye contact with these guys. See what I'm getting at? They made eye contact with them. And there's just, very, very bizarre scenarios. And another trademark that has to occur here is if these guys were somehow, what do you want to call it, demonically or divinely inspired or powered, there's usually a moment where you always will find something that made them untouchable. And that's not the case here because they got killed. Of course, it comes out afterwards. A month before this, they got pulled over, apparently deliberately, meaning that they almost seem to have done something in a rental car that made the cops pull them over. And they found all the machine gun, bombs, every single thing that they found in these cars were totally illegal. And they were arrested on heavy, heavy gun charges. This is going like ATF and beyond. Think about it. This weaponry doesn't even, You know, our military, I don't think even goes into battle with some of the bullets and stuff that these guys had. And within a month, the two guys get released. They write a letter to the judge, and the judge released all of the weapons and gave them all back to the guys that they used. They used the same weapons that were taken. The judge gave them back their weapons, and they used that in this incident. That scenario is very, very familiar to what I would consider one of these wild events. Some people think it's a false flag event. Of course, I don't believe that anymore in any of these events. You think people are saying that they're hoaxes. Well, I'm not saying that anymore. I never said that actually in the first place. Sometimes there are hoaxes. I'm saying there's something peculiar going on here. Conspiracy theorists aren't saying that. We don't believe nothing happened. Alex Jones isn't saying Sandy Hook didn't happen. No one's saying no one died. That's what other people are saying that conspiracy theorists are saying. That's not true at all. We're saying it's a false flag. And you even know what false flag means? I mean, something is being done here, and they're trying to present it as if it's these people or that person doing it for another purpose or another objective. In other words, it's not what you think. It's not Muslim terrorists. It's happening. It's real. But then look at all these other events. This building imploding. Oh, so you don't believe fire can melt steel. That's not what they're saying. They're saying there's supernatural events going on here, occurring here. And you are 100% right. And you won't get to the bottom of it because there's a million pieces of evidence that point you in another direction that are very valid pieces of evidence. Just like the Russia hack. But when you look at these incidents, and this is the one I studied, and you apply even some, I would call it supernatural knowledge, you get a lot of hits, man. You start realizing this is something I don't want to look into. Well, I may admit that. But it's very freaky to realize we have this shit happening around us every day. Now, am I saying these two guys are ghosts? No, but it wouldn't shock me after what I've seen. I mean, there's some very bionic, supernatural things that occur. And I think we all have seen something like that in our life. And we still don't believe in it. We don't think that applies to us. But sometimes these things happen on a grand scale. All these things come together, and they're caught on TV. We see them on TV. And you wonder why there's conspiracy theorists. But they're not really conspiracy theorists. They're not saying there's a mass plot or secret plot. They're saying this is suspicious. This scene right here. He stands there. There's 300 cops shooting at him. The bullets are bouncing off of him. But he doesn't have the AK anymore. He doesn't shoot back until he gets shot at. So he's standing there, not shooting. If you shoot at him, he aims and will fire around at you. So see how he's standing there walking back and forth? Then he gets shot at. Then he will shoot back. But he won't shoot at the cops until they shoot at him first. It's a very weird setup here. A very weird setup.
He sourced a prescription drug called phenobarbital, which will calm their nerves. Then, he puts in place the final piece of his elaborate plan. He knows that as soon as they walk in brandishing weapons, staff will trigger an alarm. But Phillips has been listening to police scanners and doing his sums. He's worked out that it will take police about 8 minutes to get to the scene. They set their watches to alert them when their 8-minute time limit is up. The North Hollywood heist has begun. In an extraordinary coincidence, just 20 meters away. In an extraordinary coincidence, just 20 meters away, two officers drive past in their patrol car. They suspect that the giant black-clad figures are the notorious high-incident bandits. The officers pull up and report a suspected 211, police code for an armed robbery. This is the actual call they make.
5840, requesting assistance. We have a possible 211 in progress at the brink of America.
It's only designed to withstand small arms fire.
And I can feel the nozzle of the rifle being placed on my back. He hit me with the rifle on the side of the head like, I mean business. And I said, well, let's go to the vault. I can feel it in his tone. Now he's getting a little more aggressive. He's saying, where's all of it? I want you to open up all of it. So what does he do? He opens fire in all the money that's in that cabin. all of a sudden he got very quiet. But now he's putting his nozzle on me. And I was thinking, well, you know, this is it. This is really it for me now. Wow, can't be. It's too soon, you know? I didn't even say goodbye to my daughter. I didn't.
Blocking off junctions north and south of the bank. The police have cornered the robbers, but they've no idea what Phillips has in mind. Now, it's payback time.
And they just brought up these two huge guns, and that was the beginning of about 45 minutes.
A bullet exits the Kalashnikov. Police are convinced that the patrol car will provide cover, but the slug slices straight through the metal. Another bullet slams into Tracy Fisher. Her body reacts immediately to the trauma. For police and civilians, nowhere is safe from such destructive power.
We are all pinned down by automatic gunfire.
He had automatic weapons with armor-piercing rounds. You know, for every one we shot, they would shoot 50. It's almost like we're shooting slingshots.
Their only hope is that the criminals will go. When, 7 minutes into the firefight, Matasaranu climbs in the Chevy and shouts at Phillips to do the same, officers pray they'll make their getaway without further bloodshed.
If they had wanted to get away at that point, they could have drove out that parking lot right then.
But Phillips knows he's packing the bigger weapons, and he's not finished yet. LAPD is faced with an unprecedented scenario. Robbers who want to stay and fight.
We had never dealt with a situation like that in the history of law enforcement in this country. I mean, this was the first time that they had a shootout of that magnitude.
This is the first of two gunmen that shot it out with police, and we're showing you this again to give you an idea of the type of firefight that took place about 9:50 this morning, about 50 minutes after these bank robbers were confronted. Now, this is the gunman. He's crouching. He starts to walk away almost nonchalantly, but look at him with his AK-47. Now he's starting to open up. Police, he's firing at police who are across the street in a parking lot. Now, he's walking. This is what makes me think he had body armor on, because this is a guy who is almost nonchalant in the way he's walking around in that parking lot.
And sort of indiscriminate firing.
A clip full of bullets. He just sets down. Now he's changing. Another clip, pulls it out of what looks like an ammunition pack, puts another clip in there, and he's getting ready to do the same thing over again. Now you see the white car? The white car is the getaway car. Here is another pack over in the handicap parking in the bank. We don't know what was in there.
That was the rest of the money.
Across the top of the car. See the firing from inside the car? That's the second gunman. He throws something out. They're using this getaway car as cover as they fire at police who are all taking cover across the street.
As well as residents and people who happen to be shopping in the area just hit the ground.
We heard one of the people in the bank, or was just entering the bank when this was taking place, people were still lining up at the ATM machines.
Now that may have something to do with why this is happening. People were still lining up at the ATM machines. Okay?
This situation, we were also, one of the reasons we had to leave, Kyle, so quickly is that I was getting reports from our pilot that they were actually firing on us right now. Now, Dean, if we can circle back around again, we're losing it behind the tree. And yeah, circle around that way if you can. And we're going to keep an eye on these two right here. They were firing off in the direction of the police, which are, as you can see from this wider shot, they have the situation, well perimetered right now. But of course, now you have suspects that are acting quite We have suspects that are acting quite brash. Okay, we're following the suspect car right now. We've
fired. Shots being fired behind the white cone. Watch crossfire. All units watch for crossfire. Fired. Shots are being fired. Shots being fired behind the white cone. Watch crossfire. All units watch for crossfire.
That's as tight as we can get.
Market. And when we came out, we saw the Telemundo TV crew crouched down by the trailer, and that was it, man. We go, hey, we got to get over to those guys. And so as we went through the Hughes door, which all the power was turned off, we opened up the doors and everything. We got through them. Bullets started ricocheting over our heads. Out.
esta balacera, tratando de conseguir, te digo. En este momento la policía está intercambiando balas. En este momento la policía está intercambiando balas con los presuntos asaltantes.
So we're right fucking here. This guy's over here. I mean, that's less than 100 yards. Or over the side of the wall over here, that's where they stayed. One gunman stayed in his car, and the other one sort of walked back and forth in front of the cars, as you see in the video. I was waiting for these guys to make a break for it. I mean, when I was here, they could have gone through the cops with no problem. They could have gone down Archwood and just gotten away with no problem. Shooting and
where that car went. It's not in the parking lot, and what we understand is it might be moving down the streets, firing as it goes, but we aren't sure. We're still trying to locate that car, and until we do, we'll keep searching around this area here and keep an eye out. But right now, apparently he's moved over to a street called Archwood, and I'm not sure. That's just south of Van Owen, and it's just up the street here, just a little bit north of this location. So we'll take a look up there and see if we can find the suspect vehicle on Archwood. But
Archwood and Ranford, I think.
Archwood and Ranford or something like that. Anyway, we'll be looking around trying to see if we can locate this car. And so far, they've got one suspect down. We do have numerous people injured here. We did see an officer who was very badly injured. And okay, we have the car in sight right now. We do have the car. It's right up here, just a little bit south of Van Owen. And as you can see, they've got bullet holes all in the windshield of this car. And I don't know what relationship this pickup truck has to that car. Oh, there he is. It's a suspect coming out of that pickup truck. And he's firing. I don't understand what's going on here. He's firing into the car.
With bullets riddling his legs, Matasareanu goes down. He's been shot 29 times, but he's still alive. As SWAT officers move in to arrest him, Matasareanu has a final surprise.
As soon as the suspect was handcuffed, the only thing that he kept saying over and over was, shoot me, kill me. We didn't respond to the suspect. We returned to the bank.
Back on the streets, one injured man is still bleeding out. Emil Matasareanu lies here for 70 minutes until his body succumbs to the trauma and he dies. The high-incident bandits fired over 1,100 rounds of ammunition. That's a bullet every 2 seconds. What were they hoping to achieve? They could have made their getaway. When officers raided their apartment, amongst tens of thousands of dollars, they found a possible cause for the gang's bizarre behavior. In the VCR was a copy of the 1995 Hollywood heist movie, Heat. The similarities between the film and the shootout are uncanny.
I don't allow anyone to tell me how lucky I was. I don't buy it, and I don't let that pass. Luck is Vegas. Luck is horseshoe. This was an act of God, a stroke of his hand over the whole situation.
Chapter 11. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise, and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple, leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees, and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. These have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues, as often as they will. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, and shall overcome them, and kill them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. And they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts to one another, because these 2 prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. And after 3 days and a half the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. And they heard a great voice from heaven, saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. And the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell. And in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven. The 2nd woe is past, and behold, the 3rd woe cometh quickly. And the 7th angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord, and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders which sat before God on their seats fell upon their faces and worshipped God, saying, We give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee thy great power, and hast reigned. The nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail.